Hello, everybody. It is me, your good friend, Sparky. And I have recently just returned from a 2-week trip to Japan. You see, my sister lives overseas in Japan, where she teaches English to Japanese school children. And while she has come home several times to visit us, while she has been there for the last 3 or so years, I have never actually been over there to visit her. Or at least, I hadn't been until the previously mentioned 2-week trip to Japan. I basically had to save up time off for the majority of the year, plan this all out, and take my very first international flight, my very first flight in general, halfway across the world to visit her and explore the wonders of that ultimate nerd goal of visiting Japan. And you know what? It was a lot of fun. I had an amazing time. I got to go to and explore all different kinds of places, experience all sorts of new things. And I kind of miss it because it was just such a wonderful place to visit. Sadly, I did have to come home eventually and go back to my normal day-to-day job because I couldn't stay gone forever. I mean, I guess technically I could, if I really wanted to just not come back. That is entirely possible. But I did end up coming back, and here I am. And I wanted to make a series of vlog-type videos just to kind of talk about my experiences, how the trip went, what I ended up doing, and I wanted to share that with all of you lovely people watching my channel here. So yeah, that's what this is going to be. We are going to have several videos where I talk about the trip, my experiences, what I ended up doing, and some of the sweet merch that I got while I was visiting over there. The first day, the pre-trip day, of course, was flying out of America to Japan. Very, very long flight there. I made a connecting flight from New York to Chicago, and then from Chicago I got on what ended up being probably close to a 13-hour flight to Japan itself. After a 2-hour flight to Chicago and a 5-hour layover there. It was a very long trip. I was traveling for the better part of an entire day, more or less. And it was definitely interesting. I had never been on a plane before, and what a way to be introduced to that concept. It wasn't as, intense of an experience as I necessarily thought it would be. You can definitely feel the speed and momentum of the plane taking off, rising into the air. Your ears start to pop, and that's generally not super pleasant. I did get a headache about halfway through the entire main flight there, but it wasn't too bad overall. It was just kind of long, and I learned very quickly that a tall fellow such as myself is not built to fit into a tiny airplane. It was not the most pleasant, comfortable experience. It hurt my legs, it hurt my knees, it hurt my butt from sitting for so long. It was it was a learning experience. And the thing that I learned is that if I ever take another very long flight, it's that I need extra legroom, and I'm going to have to spend a little bit more money for a better seat on my trip, I think. But despite it being a very long trip, kind of an unnerving sort of experience being on my first flight, I didn't really sleep throughout the entire thing, so I was mostly awake for the better part of 24 hours, more or less. I was definitely feeling it a bit by the time the plane landed, and that's to be expected, I guess. But the entire actual flight there was pretty interesting because you don't really have a sense that you are moving somewhere, I guess, once you are in the air. The plane is definitely loud. It makes a bunch of noise. You know that you are, like, in a big vehicle, but once you're, like, actually in the plane and they, like, dim the lights and people kind of shutter the windows, and you can't really tell that you're moving a great distance at an alarming speed, I guess. So by the time I landed and by the time I was off the plane, felt like that, you know, I had just been in, like, a really long car ride for a really long time. A really long car ride that made my ears pop a lot. I don't know, this is just me explaining my experiences of being on a plane for the first time. I didn't really get the sense that I was moving a great distance, strangely enough. But at the same time, I definitely went quite a long distance. I spent the majority of my trip just kind of contemplating the fact that I had managed to travel halfway across the world to a completely different country, to a completely different time zone, and it kind of blew my mind every time I was thinking about it, because it didn't really feel like that happened. If that makes any sense. I don't know if it does. But yeah, the trip there was definitely interesting. It was a completely new experience for me, and after a very long trip there, I finally landed in Japan, where I met my sister at the airport, and we went to our hotel because we spent the first leg of this journey spending 3 days in Tokyo, more or less. 4 days, technically, I guess, but the 4th day ended up mostly being just kind of like travel time back to where my sister lived outside of the city. But yeah, that's going to be the main subject of this particular vlog, I suppose. The first initial 3 days in Tokyo, because we ended up going to several different places, spending a lot of time there, eating a lot of different foods. It was very good. It was very fun. And our first official trip day in Tokyo, which surprisingly, I did not really suffer a lot of jet lag while I was there. I was definitely tired. I definitely had a bit of a headache, but I was more awake and alert than I really expected it to be. People warn you with long flights like that you're gonna be hit with jet lag, you're gonna be tired, you're gonna be feeling sick. It's definitely gonna be not great on your senses, but I surprisingly held up pretty good. I didn't have any huge negative consequences from the long trip, which definitely helped out, because on the first official day in Tokyo, we went to a nice little place, a big mall called Shibuya Parko. It is, of course, a large mall in Shibuya, and the main feature there, for me at least, was, of course, there being an entire floor dedicated to all of the super nerdy locations, video game stores, and things like that. There was a brand new Sega store there. There was a Pokemon Center there. There was a Godzilla store, a Shonen Jump store. There was a Capcom location. And in the center of all of it, in the middle of all of this, was a big Nintendo store, the Nintendo Tokyo location. And that was quite the place to be in, especially for a giant Nintendo nerd such as myself. Of course, I love the other places too. I loved the Sega store, I loved the Capcom store, and all of it was very much relative to my interests. But the Nintendo store especially, hot dang, that was a lot of fun. I had never managed to really be at, like, a key Nintendo location like that before. I had once tried to make a trip to the New York Nintendo store, but that ended up happening right as the pandemic from a few years ago ended up causing havoc across the country, so that never really happened. I ended up making the trip to Japan before I made the trip to New York City to the Nintendo store there, which is kind of funny, honestly. But I spent a lot of time and a good bit of money in those locations. I primarily bought things from the Nintendo store and the Sega store. We made an attempt to get stuff out of the Pokemon Center as well, which had this insane, awesome Mewtwo statue at the entrance. My gosh, that thing was really cool. Definitely my favorite, display that happened to be there. But the Pokemon Center, as it turns out, was incredibly popular. Probably the most popular store on that entire floor of Shibuya Parko. And yeah, they had a line to the registers going all the way across the store. So I didn't really end up getting much there, because I didn't really feel like standing in the line that long. It was definitely an experience. But I did end up getting lots of stuff from the Nintendo store, and the Sega store in particular, like I said. Got some nice, sweet statues, a Toon Link amiibo, just all sorts of neat little things that, it's like a crazy sort of experience. It really was. I also ended up getting a Nintendo Tokyo t-shirt to mark the occasion, too, that I can wear around, and just kind of casually show off and brag about the fact that, yes, I was in the Nintendo Tokyo store. You may applaud. You may appreciate and worship me now. Ha 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 ha. But aside from all of the game stores there was something else in Shibuya that ended up catching my attention. In Shibuya Parko, with all the other game stores, there was also a pop-up store for the Earthbound/Mother franchise, which was definitely a point of interest for me because I freaking love those games. And not only that, and I had no idea this was here going into it either. A couple floors above where all of the stores was a Mother exhibit called The Shape of Mother. His entire little sort of miniature museum set up, showing off all of the different clay models that were made for promotional purposes and art purposes for Mother 1 and Mother 2 / Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound itself. And that was kind of a huge deal because I love those games, and being able to be witness to the actual clay models made so many years ago was just kind of amazing. My sister with me was not as impressed. She really didn't have the same hype level as I did for that particular location, but it was just so cool, so much fun. Unfortunately, photos were not really allowed in the exhibit itself. I ended up getting a booklet magazine type thing with a big article dedicated to the exhibit, however, that I bought, so I have some kind of commemorative pictures that way that were in the magazine itself showing off the different models. The models themselves, for being like 38 years old at this point, in surprisingly good condition. You can definitely tell there was some cosmetic damage to some of them, where some of the paint is chipped off, a couple of them had pieces missing or cracks in them. But for being as old as they are, most of them were in shockingly good shape, just showing that they were preserved very well for the most part, and I'm very glad that they did. Because as far as I know, it was all of them, all of the different models that they made for the two games. And that was kind of incredible. Sadly, they never did the same thing for Mother 3 with the clay models, so that was a little disappointing that there was no real Mother 3 representation there. But all in all, that was still so cool, so much fun. I got to draw a little a picture of Teddy at the end, the fourth party member from Mother 1, to add it to like a little collage of images that they were doing. And I was allowed to take a picture in one particular location. And just so you can see how goofy it is and how much fun I was having there. I am the Dungeon Man. And if you don't understand the significance of this picture, go play Earthbound. Just do it, okay? But yeah, Shibuya Parko overall ended up being a lot of fun like that. The completely unexpectedness of encountering the Shape of Mother exhibit definitely made it a highlight of the trip for me. Possibly one of my favorite parts, despite it being literally the first stop on the tour, more or less. But we spent basically all day in that mall, and it was a little tiring after the big long trip I just had, but it was still a lot of fun, a lot of images that are like burned into my mind now of seeing that exhibit that lies halfway across the world, and all of the different malls and the statues and things like that. All the different stores and statues, rather. It's just in my memory now, and it'll never leave. I had so much fun wandering around there. Of course, it wasn't the only things there, but those were the highlights for me, more or less. And thus we fast forward to day 2 of our Tokyo adventures. My sister had in advance reserved tickets to the Warner Bros. Studio tour, The Making of Harry Potter, which opened up a couple years ago in Tokyo, and as basically just like a giant tour and museum of sorts dedicated to all of the different Harry Potter movies. And the Harry Potter books and movies were a huge part of my childhood growing up. I know that the franchise has unfortunately embroiled in some unfortunateness with its creator just being a very aggressive, unfortunate person to deal with, and it sullies the reputation of the franchise for a lot of people, but it doesn't really change the fact that Harry Potter was a gigantic part of my childhood. When those books came out and when those movies came out, they were big family moments for everybody. Reading the books together and going to see all of the movies. And this entire tour was dedicated to the movies in particular. And there were a lot of really cool sights to see there. In particular, the tour had been set up for the anniversary of the Goblet of Fire film. So there was a lot of Goblet of Fire things on display right away to see. Different costumes, different props for the entire movie franchise, like the actual props and outfits from the sets of the movies worn and interacted by with the actors themselves. There are a lot of different sections to the tour. You got to go through like the different common rooms and the Forbidden Forest. There was a section with Hagrid's hut and the Dursley residence. The big bridge that got, I think, blown up in the last movie. And halfway through, there was also like a big cafe type area where you could get butterbeer, which was an interesting drink to have. It was very sweet, of course, that you could probably guess by the name. Almost caramel-like, or even butterscotch-ish. It was good, though. But being able to go through the tour and try to pick out where different things were in the movies, and just being able to see all of the actual things they had there that were on the screen and behind the scenes, it was just really, really cool. I thoroughly enjoyed myself going through the different areas there, and I got to go on a recreation of Hagrid's motorcycle, his flying motorcycle from the various films. That was a lot of fun. Pretty goofy, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. Getting to experience, like, such a huge part of your childhood up close like that is mesmerizing in a way. And if you're ever in the area and you happen to grow up with the series, I definitely recommend it. You do have to reserve tickets in advance, so just plan for that. But yeah, that was really cool too. That ended up taking up pretty much all of the day on day number 2. Just the big Harry Potter tour and being able to see all of the different awesome stuff from the movies. And day 3 was kind of similar, in a way where it was very centered around something from mine and my sister's childhood, and that was our trip to Odaiba. And what makes Odaiba pretty significant to us is the fact that Odaiba is the location in Japan where the Digi-Destined are from, the characters from the first and second seasons of Digimon. So the entire Odaiba trip, for the most part, was done in order to kind of visit various locations, specifically from the first Digimon adventure, where they had the entire Myotismon arc in Odaiba itself in the real world. And yeah, it was a really weird, nerdy reason to do that, but at the same time, I don't regret it a bit. It was really cool being able to go there and try and find different locations kind of close up. Of course, it wasn't all about the Digimon locations, too. There are various malls in Odaiba, too. I feel like we went to 3 or 4 different malls while we were in the area, just exploring around and window shopping a bit. Outside of one of them was a giant Gundam statue. The statue is located outside of a place called Diver City Tokyo Plaza in Odaiba, and it is a life-size Unicorn Gundam statue, and I'm not necessarily the biggest Gundam fan, but of course, being able to see something like that right up close was really, really, really cool. It was quite the sight to see exactly how big a Gundam really is right up close and personal, and it was pretty neat. But of course, going to the different malls and such there was a lot of fun too. I got to eat takoyaki for the first time, which was really, really good. And we ended up getting dinner later at a really nice sort of all-you-can-eat buffet there too, in a different mall than the one that had the Gundam statue outside of it. And of course, there was shopping. There was plenty of shopping and things to do in the various kinds of malls. One place in particular ended up having a bunch of Super Sentai merchandise in it, which was a very dangerous place for me to be, because I suppose it's no surprise that I ended up spending a lot of money while I was on this trip. Of course, there was the initial plane ticket there, helping pay for hotel costs and things like that. But I spent a lot of money on various food locations and merchandise areas, and I ended up getting a couple of different Super Sentai transformation devices. One of which being the Gokaiger Morpher, I'm gonna call it, because I'm a Power Rangers nerd at heart, and I refer to them as Morphers. Sorry, the transformation device. I got that with a couple of the different Ranger keys, and there was also the Gold Star Rangers Burger Morpher from Ninja as well. That is definitely not something that they prominently used in the American version Ninja Steel, but it is hilarious that the Gold Ranger transforms with a cheeseburger. And yeah, I had to have it. It was definitely, like, necessary for me to get that. It was just a fun time, and I was really afraid to spend too much time in that location because they had a lot of stuff there that I probably would have kept buying and wouldn't have been able to get home and fit in my suitcase. So, I had to limit myself a little bit. But as mentioned, the main highlight for the Odaiba trip was trying to pick out various locations from Digimon Adventure. The biggest one being, like, a big focal point of the Myotismon arc, the Fuji TV building. It's the building that has the giant sphere structure on top of it. I don't know the full function of that big sphere, or why it's a big sphere to begin with, but it's definitely eye-catching and very recognizable. And we did get to go up onto the Fuji TV building and explore around a little bit. They had, like, little touristy areas and things like that. You could go inside the building and up inside of the sphere as well, but that did kind of cost extra, so we didn't end up doing that. But just sort of being there and getting to see it up close, just that iconic building, completely unique looking area, it was really, really awesome. I liked it a lot. Another couple kind of key locations that we ended up finding were the various apartment buildings where the different Digidestined lived. And also the bay where the Rainbow Bridge is, which is pretty significant to the second Digimon Adventure movie, Our War Game. That is the bay where the nuclear missile that's launched at Japan ends up crashing down towards the end of the film. So, yeah, it was kind of fun to be there in a very odd sort of way. Just being able to be up close and see all the different visual influences that went into the first Digimon Adventure was kind of mind-blowing to, like, actually see it. Because, like I said, Digimon was such a huge, huge part of mine and my sister's life. It still is. We have Digimon-related conversations to this very day. And Odaiba has a ton of other sort of tourist attraction locations there, too. There's the Statue of Liberty, oddly enough. Yeah, it's in Odaiba, if you didn't know that. Just kind of being there was super surreal. I mean, I mentioned that was kind of like the whole trip in a nutshell. Just being in Japan was a very surreal feeling. Like, it didn't feel like I was actually there a lot of the time. It's like, exciting things like this happen to other people, not me, you know? It's very strange to describe. And just thinking about it, it still feels weird that I had actually done it and was there, experiencing all these different things, recognizing all of these sights, and it's just so cool. So very cool. But yeah, we basically spent the entire day in Odaiba shopping around and taking in all the sights on our little Digimon-related tour. It was really, really cool. It was a lot of fun. Day 4 in Tokyo, though, was more or less our goodbye to Tokyo, because we had to check out of the hotel and wait for our bullet train to come later in the day. We took the bullet train to Morioka, and then from Morioka we got on the bus to where my sister lives in Kazuno. And thus ended the Tokyo arc of the trip once we arrived in the much more rural area of Kazuno. Definitely a bit of a different feeling and experience than the big city in Japan there. I will say, if you do ever end up planning a trip to Japan yourself, sticking around the city area might be the better idea because it is very English and tourist friendly. Basically, all of the major signage, the different restaurant menus, things like that, they all have English text on them, so it makes it very easy just to kind of visually navigate where you are and figure out where you're going and what you're doing. It's not so much that case when you're in the more rural areas where you will have sometimes locations that don't have any English at all. So if you don't really know much of the language like I do, you do end up being a bit on the confused side. Thankfully, I had my sister there as an interpreter of sorts, so it was not that bad for me. And another interesting part about traveling around Tokyo is definitely the trains. Public transportation in Japan is very big on train travel. And in addition to I've never been on a plane before, I had never really been on a train before either. And I spent a lot of time going from location to location around Tokyo, especially on various different kinds of trains. You do tend to be kind of packed into those train cars like sardines, though. So if you have problems with personal space, just kind of be prepared for that if you make a trip yourself. But yes, I suppose that will call it for right now. That is the very first part of Sparky's travel adventures in Tokyo. It was really fun being in the city. We only got to spend the few days there just because of hotel expenses and things like that. But we got to go to so many different places and see so many different amazing sights that it was totally worth it. Please stay tuned for more future episodes in the Sparky Japan travel adventures, because there's still quite a bit to go. That was really just like the first 4 or 5 days, more or less, and like I said, I spent 2 full weeks there. So I hope you look forward to hearing more of my stories about what I did and what I saw in Japan. And until then, this is your good friend Sparky signing off for now, and I'll catch you later.